Newsworks in cooperation with Eau Claire County.
Good evening, Supervisors. I call to order this regular meeting of the Eau Claire County Board of Supervisors on Tuesday, March the 16th, 2021. Would you scroll that, please, Catherine? Thank you. First will be honoring of the flag. Supervisors, please unmute, and together we will recite the Pledge of Allegiance, or we will try. I pledge allegiance
to the flag
of the United States of America, and to the
republic
which it
stands, nation, under God,
indivisible,
with liberty and justice for all. That was pretty good. Thank you, Supervisors. A moment of reflection by Supervisor Dunning.
1 year ago this week was the last time that we met as a group in the county boardroom. Since that time, we've had a major upheaval in how we handle county business as board members, and how employees of the county carry out their duties working from home without proper equipment, and how our individual lives have changed. The advent of the COVID-19 virus has been a major influence in all our lives. We have had to adjust to working from home, to learn how to use Zoom and WebEx, to not be able to see each other in person, and to not be able to do the small talk that connects us. We had certain departments see their workload on 24-hour days and 7 days a week as they work to save lives and then have to face the fear, criticism, and threats as they perform their duties. These employees deserve more appreciation than we can give them. And then there is the effect on our personal lives. In my case, I became aware of how not seeing children, grandchildren, and relatives for 6 months and even up to a year is so depressing. How feeling that time was standing still and yet events were speeding by. Yesterday, but the future's. In the pandemic world, time feels like the past so different than it did before. Not being able to travel for a year was so confining. It did add a year of life to my car and allowed me to catalog thousands of photographs. I even finished several projects around the house. Trees were removed, the house was painted, and new gutters were paid for with money we didn't spend on gas and entertainment. The past year was a period in my life that I would not want to repeat or to wish on others. Hopefully, now that the vaccine is available, there will be a return to a routine life. Probably not the same life that we had a year ago, but a life that we choose and not have chosen for us. As you reflect on the past year, I hope your life was one that you could handle and that the upcoming months will bring you a new life that you can enjoy and appreciate, and that we will all be able to get back together again soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Dunning. Clerk McDonald, would you please call the roll?
All right. Supervisor Gibson,
present.
McKinney,
Present.
Nelly,
Here.
Pagonis,
Here.
Anton, Zook,
Here.
Chilson, Stelgis,
Here.
Lowry,
Present.
Coffee,
Here.
Henning,
Here.
Bates.
Here.
I saw you on Colleen. Russell, yep.
Present.
Gatlin,
Present.
Smyer,
Here.
Hambuck Boyle, Neiman,
Here.
Dunning,
Here.
Wilkie,
Here.
Anderson,
Present.
Beckfield, Schneider,
Here.
Leary,
Here.
DeLuca,
Here.
Jansen,
Here.
Schroffnagel,
Here.
Roberts,
Here.
Frank,
Here.
Ann Christofferson.
Present.
I have 26 present.
Thank you. We have quorum. The next item is approval of the Journal of Proceedings of March the 2nd, 2021. The chair looks for a motion.
Henning approves.
Moved by Henning,
Gatlin second.
second by Gatlin. Are there any additions, corrections, or deletions in the Journal of Proceedings? I hear none. Supervisors will do this by voice vote. Please unmute for a moment. Thank you. All those in favor of approving the Journal of Proceedings as distributed, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed by nay. It is unanimous. Thank you. Next on our agenda is public comment. I turn to our county clerk.
We did receive one public comment that she asked that we read it at the meeting. It's from Susan Wolfgram, and it's regarding item number 6 on our agenda, the diversity and inclusion update. It reads as follows. Good evening, Eau Claire County Board Supervisors. June 9th, 2020, Eau Claire County signed on to the Racism is a Public Health Crisis Resolution, file 2021/30. By signing on to the resolution, Eau Claire County committed to ensuring that racial equity is a core element of Eau Claire County, and most importantly, in terms of systemic and structural change, led by people who are most impacted. This work begins before the work begins, by outreach to diverse community leaders across the county, inviting them or whom they recommend to sit at this task force table, and then being guided by their input every step moving forward. Change does not come with maintaining the status quo. We must center our community in decision-making, not after a task force is formed, but before it is formed. People with lived experience are experts. In what ways with regard to racial equity has ECC been willing to step back and center our diverse community, not control the dynamic or the outcome when it comes to systems professionals? How have we centered people who are systems impacted? I and other community advocates who have been working to center impacted people at the tables of the city and county, but speaking for myself this evening, would highly recommend that a first step before going any further is to design a county public forum on racial equity, anti-oppression, justice, and human rights, guided by those most impacted. I agree with the Task Force for EDISJ, their statement that the first step to creating a more inclusive and equitable organization is to understand your status quo. What I do not agree with is that this means you start with a survey designed by the status quo. If we step back and be intentional to understand the status quo, it is to start with listening to impacted community members and be guided by their input every action, every step of the way. Thank you for considering my comments.
I'm sorry, was that the end?
Yes, that's the end.
Thank you. Supervisors, I believe you've received by email attachment other public comment. Is there anyone else who wishes to present public comment? Is there anyone else who wishes to present public comment? I assume there's no one else wishing to present comment. We will move on to the next item, reports to the county board, beginning with oral reports. And first is a pre-sale report for the 2021B and 21C bond issues. Sean Lentz, are you online?
You don't want to go outside, go potty? I'm right here.
Hello?
Go outside?
I'm sorry. Is Sean?
Somebody's not mute when they should be. We're hearing a private conversation.
Okay, thank you. But still, is Sean Lentz online?
Chair Smeyer, this is Supervisor Pagonis. I don't see him in the lineup.
Okay.
We just met with him a few minutes ago, so he should be on. So
This is Norb. I think he is on in the participant listing.
Really?
If you look at all attendees, I believe he is, whether he's connected or not, I'm sure, but
But we don't hear him in any
Yeah.
event. So I think what we'll do is move on to the second report and come back to Sean. That's okay? Supervisor Pagonis, is that okay?
yes, it's a good idea.
Okay. So information on landfill from Corp Counsel Tim Sullivan. I asked for this item to be put on, not because we have action on the landfill, but because there's a lot of activity going on. And I believe that the board members need the information so they know exactly how this is proceeding. So Corp Counsel Sullivan, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Smyer. And what I'm going to give is just a brief overview of what's been happening out at the 7 Mile Creek landfill. Right now, and just for those of you who don't know, the 7 Mile Creek landfill is located in the town of Seymour. It's out on Highway Q, out by 7 Mile Creek. It's a number of miles east of the city of Eau Claire, pretty much straight out on Highway Q. The landfill, the history of it is that it's currently privately owned and has been since 1996. Prior to that time, it was owned by Eau Claire County. There was ownership by the city of Eau Claire, and also there's a landfill that was owned by the town of Seymour. After it was sold by the county in 1996, it has undergone several expansions under the private ownership. Those expansions are regulated ultimately by the Department of Natural Resources, and they have to go through what is called a siting process or an expansion process pursuant to the statutes, and the statutes are Wisconsin statutes, primarily Chapter 289, and in particular 289.33. Whenever there is a petition for an expansion, which occurred by the then owner, Advanced Disposal Services, which was filed in 2018, there is what is created as a local negotiating committee. Back in 2019, I believe it was, under Resolution 1920-091, Eau Claire County passed a resolution appointing representatives to the local negotiating committee. There are 2 representatives from Eau Claire County. One is Board Supervisor Ray Henning, and the other is Matt Steinbach, who is an employee of the City County Health Department. He also lives in a rural part of Eau Claire County. In addition to that, the town of Seymour and the city of Eau Claire, according to statute, were authorized to appoint representatives to the local negotiating committee, and they have done that. The local negotiating committee meets typically out at the town of Seymour, although we have met in Eau Claire County at the courthouse, and we've also met at the city of Eau Claire. Those meetings are subject to the public records law and the open meetings law. They are noticed in the paper. Typically, they are attended not only by the siting committee, but we also typically have members from the neighborhood that attend those meetings. And then sometimes, depending on the subject matter of the meeting, may also have representatives from the owner of the landfill. Earlier, I said that the landfill expansion was started by a company called ADS, Advanced Disposal Services. ADS has since sold the landfill. They did that in 2020 to a company called GFS, and I'm not sure what the GFS stands for, but that sale did slow down the negotiating process. As I indicated earlier, the expansion of the landfill is ultimately determined whether or not that expansion is going to occur by the Department of Natural Resources. That Department of Natural Resources has reviewed it and given their blessing to the expansion. So then the question is what does the local negotiating committee negotiate? Well, what they can't do under the statute is that they can't negotiate the size of the landfill. the citing of it. They cannot make the applicant's responsibilities under the approved feasibility report, that's the report that's issued by the Department of Natural Resources, less stringent than what is required by the state. And they cannot negotiate the need for the facility. Essentially what happens is the local negotiating committee can negotiate certain items with regards to the landfill. Those items would be, for example, I'm going to just get my list here to make sure I have it correct. Compensation to any person for substantial economic impacts which are a direct result of the facility, including insurance and damages not covered by Waste Management Fund. So what that means is that items such as socioeconomic payments, which you've probably heard from neighbors of the landfill are requesting that be negotiated, are one of those items that can be negotiated. Property value guarantees, that commonly is in the negotiated item within landfill contracts. And then also something else that typically is negotiated as far as compensation would be tipping fees. Tipping fees are fees that are paid by the landfill to the local governing bodies as compensation for the impact of having the landfill within their jurisdiction. In for Eau Claire County, if you think about it, because there's a landfill, there's many trucks every day going up and down Highway Q, across usually from the North Crossing out to Highway Q. That has an impact on the road and how soon that road needs to be repaired or replaced. And so that would be the economic compensation for that. Other things that could be negotiated by the local negotiating committee would be reimbursement of reasonable costs by the local committee related to the negotiation, mediation, and arbitration. They can negotiate screening and fencing related to the appearance of the facility, but it cannot affect the design concept or capacity of the facility. They can negotiate the operational concerns, including but not limited to noise, dust, debris, odors, hours of operation, but excluding design capacity. They can negotiate traffic flows and patterns resulting from the facility. They can negotiate use of the site where the facility is located after the closing. So what's going to happen to the site when the landfill ultimately is closed? How is it going to be remediated? What are they going to do to return it to some usable form so it's not just a big pile of dirt sitting out in the town of Seymour? And then they can also negotiate economically feasible methods to recycle or reduce quantities of waste to the facility. There for a while, and has been previously negotiated, is that they were running a composting operation out at the landfill. So these are the limitations of the negotiating committee. How the negotiation process works is that there's, just like any other negotiation process, the committee gets together. They will typically have an open meeting for a period of time. Then they go into closed session to discuss negotiations, and then ultimately create a negotiation position and present that to the landfill. The landfill in response will give us their negotiating position, and that goes back and forth until ultimately an agreement is reached. If there is an agreement reached, then that agreement is reduced to writing. That agreement then would be submitted to the governing bodies, the city, the town, and the county for approval. The governing bodies would then either approve or disapprove the agreement. It's not the responsibility of, for example, the county board to negotiate it. Your responsibility was to appoint individuals to negotiate on our behalf, and you've done that. If there is no agreement, or if the towns do not approve the agreement, or the governing bodies do not approve the agreement, then it would likely go to arbitration. And at that point, then the matter would be turned over to an arbitrator. It would be similar to like a trial. Each side would present their sides, and the arbitrator would make the decision as to what is going to be resolved with regards to the issues that have been identified by both sides of the negotiations. So essentially where we're at in this process is that after ADS commenced their request for an expansion, it went to the DNR. The DNR has approved it. They issued their facilities report. Then subsequent to that, we are now in the process where we need to conclude the negotiations with the local committee and the current landfill owners. It has been some time since the negotiations took place. They were suspended in the summer of 2020 because of A, the pandemic, and then B, also because of the sale of the landfill. The new owners of the landfill had not yet taken over. They have done that now. And so sometime soon in the near future, these negotiations would resume. It's important to note that I am not on the committee. I'm an advisor for Eau Claire County. I do attend the meetings when the committee convenes. I do that primarily to provide legal assistance, but also there are certain things that come from the county that we provide assistance with. For example, when they need a map of the surrounding properties, we will go to the planning development department and get that map. And I facilitate doing that through planning department. I will contact them and request them to do that. Other things that may need to come from the county, such as the history with regards to previous contracts, previous agreements, with regards to some of these issues, they're found within county files, and I provide that information for the committee. So that's a summary of the negotiating committee in a nutshell. If you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
Schneider with a question.
Sure.
When and how do we give our best input to our representatives? Because it seems like we ought to talk with our representatives early on so they know what to negotiate for, rather than just telling them at the end, oh, we don't like what you did.
Hi, so when I'm sharing my screen, do I have to keep changing it to reshare it? You know what I mean?
Catherine, you're talking to the group? So Catherine Schneider, the answer to that, Supervisor Schneider, the answer to that is the two representatives from Eau Claire County are Supervisor Henning and Matt Steinbach, who works for the health department. If you as an individual supervisor wish to speak with them about that issue, you can do that.
I've asked Supervisor Henning to be available to make comment or answer questions. Supervisor Henning, did you wish to comment? Supervisor Henning? I will assume that you don't wish to make comment.
No, I will.
Oh,
I was
sorry. Go ahead.
I was muted. Look, Tim did a very thorough job, and I'm happy to meet with or talk to anybody that would desire. But as he said, our hands are pretty tied until we get some information, a request to see how the landfill owner wants to proceed. That's the step that we're into right now with our negotiations. So being that they just took over, we haven't gotten any requests for anything to negotiate. So right now, we're just sitting and standing in the hall waiting like you are to hear something. And as soon as that they let us know that they have something, I will let the whole board know. And I'll keep you posted with anything that goes on. But right now, we're just sitting waiting for them to come and say, this is what we'd like to negotiate. So it's not our turn to ask them. Colleen?
Thank you. Supervisor Russell first, and then Supervisor
Oh.
Bates.
Okay.
Supervisor Russell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Sullivan mentioned that he is not, he is in a supportive role. Am I right in assuming that Steve Nick from the city staff would be acting in sort of a legal advice role then in reviewing the contract or reviewing what the company is offering?
Well, Steve Nick is a member representing Eau Claire. Anders Hillquist from Weld Riley is the attorney hired by the landfill organization. I mean, the group from the county, the city of Eau Claire, and the town of Seymour.
And
So
Supervisor Russell, if I may interrupt too. The other thing is that when this agreement is drafted, it will need to come to my office for review before it comes to the county board.
Okay. Okay.
I think that's going to your question.
Legalize you looking at this.
Yes. And that's why I'm part of the process also, because ultimately they realize it's going to come to me. So
Supervisor Bates, followed by Supervisor Jansen, followed by Supervisor Coffey.
Thank you, Chair Smyer. In the past, when we have had this issue come up, some of the information in regard to what the DNR had collected was shared with the various governing groups. And I had concerned a number of years ago about some issues with 7 Mile Creek and that incident to Lake Altoona. Could you tell me, Ray or Tim, whether or not any of the information on the DNR's determinants that allowed this to move forward were shared with any governing entity?
You're muted, Supervisor Henning.
Em, you want to get that?
my understanding is that the feasibility report was shared with the committee through legal counsel for the committee.
This is an open meeting and an open committee. Is there any reason why that information should not be shared with the governing entities?
No.
If it's requested?
Yeah, no, there's no reason why it shouldn't be shared, as far as I'm aware.
Supervisor
Is that
Henning.
something this group would be interested in, Ray?
If I'm understanding, you're talking about water damage or damage to the creeks, or is that what you're referring to?
There's a number of wells in place around the landfill that are determinant and determine whether or not there is an issue. I think as with all landfills, it isn't a question of whether or not the membrane will leak. The question is when. And so that's always something that's supposed to be watched very carefully. So I would hope that we would be able to have access to the information that assures us that our lake is still safe and that the water around the landfill is still safe, not only for our water bodies, but for the people that have wells in that area.
Supervisor Bates, if I could just a minute.
Go ahead.
Supervisor Henning, I know that we had a number of meetings where this issue was discussed. Matt Steinbeck is on the health department. He works in environmental sciences. And this is an issue that was exactly discussed was the monitoring wells. And I know that the health department receives regular reports from those monitoring wells. And they have that information at the health department also. So
Supervisor Bates, are you requesting that information come forward at the time that
I think is there anyone on the county board who feels they don't need to see it?
Yeah, I
Well,
want to see it.
there's no
yeah, the
attempt?
health, the health department does have it. It's
Yeah.
available from the health department too. So it's right in the records. And the Matt from the health department is very active, and there's an agreement with the landowners and the landfill where their wells are tested yearly or more, and there's no problem with any of the wells. So, but they are they're tested all the time. So, and if at any time that the owner wants another test, the landfill is more than happy to do it for them. So,
Supervisor Jansen.
Thank you. One of the questions that I have is a little bit about when we do move into these negotiations, will there be time for public comment, and how can those who are most affected have their voices heard? And the reason why I'm asking is because I've chatted with some of the constituents from this area, and a lot of what they've said is that a lot of the negotiations happen in closed sessions. And so they feel like they're not being included in the conversation and like their voices aren't being heard. I've heard stories of, them gathering 30 letters and dropping them off with the legal counsel for the landfill, and then those letters not be distributed to the committee. So I'm just wondering about what is the proper way that the constituents that are going to be affected by these negotiations can have their voices heard. And second part to that is, where will these be noticed when we move into these negotiation meetings? Where will these be noticed where we can access them? On the calendar, I'm assuming?
well, yes, the people are notified as everybody else is of any meeting, and they're all open meetings until we do go into negotiations, which is in closed session. You can't have negotiations with everybody in the town of Seymour there at a meeting. I mean, it just doesn't work. And but it's not being hid from anybody. But as of right now, we don't have anything to negotiate. And but when any action is taken in closed session, it has to be shared when you come out of closed session. That's law. So it's nothing. It's just like our meetings with the county board. If we have a closed session and we don't take any actions, we can just announce we didn't take any action. And if we did, it has to be disclosed what action was taken by whatever group that has gone into closed session. So, and so when the time comes to get something that both sides feel that they get happy with, then it'll go out to open session, and everybody town of Seymour, Eau Claire, and the county will have access to that.
And Supervisor Jansen, I would just add to that at the meetings I've attended, the neighborhood association has been present at many of them, probably the majority of them. They've been given an opportunity to present their requests. They have done that on many occasions. In addition to that, I can't speak for the rest of the people on the committee, but I know that I've received multiple documents from members of the neighborhood association indicating what they're requesting. In addition to that, they've hired outside counsel, their own attorney, who also has sent me letters indicating what it is that they're requesting that the negotiating committee negotiate on their behalf. So it's not a matter of that the negotiating committee isn't aware of what they're requesting. negotiations are typically conducted between the two parties. The results of the negotiations typically are not announced until there are results because it's negotiation. And again, as Supervisor Henning says, you can't negotiate with the whole town of Seymour there. So it's not a matter of that they haven't had an opportunity to present their information. I think it's just a matter of that they're frustrated because there hasn't been an answer forthcoming. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that there's been a delay for a year. So.
Supervisor, sorry, go ahead, Supervisor.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was just going to call him Supervisor Coffee.
Go ahead.
All right, thank you. The first question, Colleen addressed much of what I was concerned about, and I guess I would like a little bit more detail about water quality. And I know there are monitoring wells at the landfill, but also how far are the wells also monitored more regularly in the neighboring households? And how far is it, within a mile, within a half a mile? And when you say they can have a test whenever they want to test, I think there are probably more parameters than that, and I would like to understand those. The transparency issue, Tim, I do appreciate that. I know you've tried very hard to give more information to the people in the neighborhood, and I agree they are very confused. The siting committee, I guess I would like to understand a little bit better what action means, so there would be no revealing what was talked about during that negotiation unless there would actually be something that could be voted on. Or could you explain both the wells and what kinds of things can be shared when it's in closed session?
Well, first of all, let me talk about the wells. I know that in the past meetings I've attended, there was maps that show all of the monitoring wells and the properties that are being monitored. And I believe the health department has all of that information. So it would be a matter of contacting the health department and getting that information. And they would also tell me they would also indicate the frequency of testing. The other thing that you haven't asked about is 7 Mile Creek. And that also is tested on a regular basis as far as I'm aware, or at least that's what was discussed at some meetings. To give you some indication about the water clarity, and I remember Matt making this comment at one meeting. He said, you know, even at the landfill, at the office in the middle of the landfill, there's a well there. And you start thinking about that, well, there's a well there? Who's drinking out of that well? Apparently that well still comes up safe to drink. So I don't know how that's possible. I don't understand the science of it, but apparently that's one of those issues. So, you know, that information can be gotten. What I would say with regards to negotiations is they're just that. Under the closed or open meetings law, negotiations are an issue that we can go into closed session for. And so typically what happens is that during these meetings with the siting committee, what they're doing is developing negotiation strategy. And then counsel for the negotiating committee, and again, the landfill ultimately ends up having to pay for that counsel by negotiation, will then submit the position of the siting committee to the landfill. And it goes back and forth until, just like any other negotiation, until there's an agreement that's been reached. Once that agreement has been reached, then there would be announcement of that agreement and people would have a right to comment on it and react to it. And then subsequent to that, it has to go to the town board, the city council and the county board to approve the agreement. So.
Thank you. Next is Supervisor Dunning, followed by Supervisor Knight, followed by Supervisor Wilkie. Supervisor Dunning.
Thank you. My question goes back to what Supervisor Bates and Supervisor Coffey had as far as our groundwater is concerned. We we control or we are monitoring all of the home building that goes on out in the rural areas and all of the issues. And our groundwater committee has a big need for being aware of what's going on. Now, Matt is also on our committee, so that we will bring him into our next session. But I also want to know how it was that in the agreement of selling the landfill to whoever we sold it to, we gave up the right to control some of the decisions that are made on that. At least that's what I'm hearing. We gave up the right. And especially if we gave up a certain amount, the fact that they're expanding, does that exceed the limit that we gave them permission for? So I'd like to have a little more about how we gave up our right to have any say-so.
I don't know that giving up our right is the correct way of stating that, but the law with regards to landfills has changed over the years so that it's now a statewide concern. If you look at 289.33 sub 5 sub A, it says the establishment of facilities, meaning landfills, is a matter of statewide concern. If you remember back in the 60s, 70s, a lot of little communities all had a landfill. You don't see those anymore. Most of our landfills in the state are what I would call regional landfills. We have one here, there's one in Dane County, there's one over by Green Bay. There's a limited number of landfills in the state, and these landfills take in waste from a large geographical area, including from other states. And so essentially what's happened is that the Department of Natural Resources has taken over the regulation of landfills. And so when you're talking about water, you're talking about the regulation of how high it can go, how wide it can go. That's all regulated by the Department of Natural Resources. It's no longer regulated on a local level. So.
Supervisor Knight.
Yes. Before the negotiations began with Advanced, the standing committee did say what their beginning position was, and it included a fairly big jump in the tipping fees. I believe it included some property value guarantees, or you're going to at least try this. I think it did not include any kind of social economic payments, which the neighbors have been lobbying for heavily. I guess I'm wondering, now that there's a new owner, are you back to square one, or do you pick up wherever those lobbying positions were, or wherever the negotiation positions were? And also, it seems to me like the same characters are around. I think Mark Vineal, the manager at what was Advanced, is still the guy out there right now. So have things really changed that much?
Supervisor Henning?
Well, we don't run the landfill. We have no control over who they hire or who their employees are. That's up to the landfill and not up to us. But the items that you're talking about and the agreements, all of the agreements that the people that are concerned offered all of these of social or mileage or everything was all brought on the table, and then the landfill has all of that, and that's part of the things that we're waiting for, is to see what they're going to offer, because it isn't up to us to tell them what they're going to do, and we're waiting for them to tell us what they'd like and what they want to offer. If they want to give people money that's a mile away, they can say we'd like to do that. Now, if they don't bring it up, we can also ask them why and negotiate from there on. But until they come to us and show us their cards on, we're, like I said earlier, we're just sitting here waiting like you are. and we can't play their cards for them. They have to do it themselves.
Well, it
Thank
would
you.
be nice if you could ask them why. And as far as Mark Vinyl still being there, I'm on the standing committee, and he showed up at our meeting, so I think he's still a player in this.
I'm on that committee too, and he is a member. So, or he I don't think he's not an actual member, but he comes down anytime we like any information, and he's very easy to work with.
One comment for Colleen, the DNR did hold a hearing, I think it was this summer, and some supervisors did weigh in on that. I know I sent in written comments, and they pretty much signed off. They said, we've looked at the groundwater, we've looked at air quality, we've looked at how high this thing is going to go, and they said we can't oppose it. You know, it meets our criteria. So I think that's where we stand right now. And that report is out there somewhere if you want to. It's a little bit wonkish, but if you want to take a look at it.
Supervisor Wilkie.
Just one brief thing. Earlier, a number of comments or questions were brought up about water quality. Just a thought, Chairman Smyer, you might want to consider having our city county health department appropriate personnel attend one of our county board meetings and give a brief presentation about what their role is or is not as a city county health department. Because there was, just concern about that, the testing, and the files are there. So let the city county health department speak to it.
I'll take that into consideration. And since you sit on the administration committee, I assume you'll bring that up. I trust that you will. Supervisor, the last speaker will be Supervisor Kronk.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to understand, and I apologize if I missed this, once the negotiations happen and the final agreements come, you said to the city and the county for voting, are we voting?
And the town of Seymour.
And the town of Seymour, excuse me.
Yeah.
So those three local governing bodies, are we voting on the totality of those agreements, or are any of those pieces negotiable, or it's a straight yes or no?
It's a yes or no.
It's a yes or no.
And what happens if the three bodies don't agree, as we've seen in the past? What happens then? It goes back?
It likely goes to arbitration then. It goes before an arbitrator, and then the arbitrator will decide.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Supervisors Coffey and Knight, would you please lower your hands? Thank you. Thank you very much. This was all intended to be background information. We don't expect to see any action coming forward to county board for quite a while. At least according to Supervisor Henning, it will take a while to bring it forward. But this was information so that you would be fully informed.
Yeah, and as soon as we do get anything, I'll make sure everybody hears about it.
Thank you. Is Sean online at this point? Sean Lentz?
Yes, Chairman, I am here.
Okay.
Yep, I was gonna say.
Thank you. So we're going back to you, Mr. Lentz, to present the pre-sale reports. Thank you.
Great. Yes, I think Samantha, there it is. Samantha has put up on the screen the material that I was going to review with the board this evening. The last meeting I attended, we got the green light from the county board to proceed with two debt issues, one for the highway facility building, and the second for the county's 2001 capital projects. I will get to those in 1 second. Beforehand, I did want to update the county board on the annual process. When we do debt issues, we also update the county's bond rating. The first couple of pages of the handout today, or on the screen, as it may be, is the updated credit opinion from Moody's Investor Service for the county. And I'm happy to say that they have maintained the AA1 rating for Eau Claire County. And I would mention, I mentioned this to the Finance Committee, I think this was probably the most positive meeting we've had with them in the last couple of years. They have shown some concern in recent years about the declining fund balance circumstances. And the 2020 results, I believe, as you've been told by Norb recently, are showing that likely that trend is been turned around and the reserves will be growing somewhat this year rather than additional draws on the reserve. So with that, we had a very good discussion that Catherine, Norb, Amy, and I were a part of. I think Tim was also there. And again, happy to report that the county has maintained that very, very strong AA1 rating. Samantha, if you could go forward a couple of pages for me to the bid tabulation. Perfect. Thank you very much. As I'd mentioned, we put out for bid 2 sales today. This year, the county is doing a legacy project. That's the category I would put it in the highway facility building. So this is a unique financing that we, in talking with the county board and first the finance committee, decided that a 20-year debt repayment is a good fit for this project with a very long useful life that it has. Also, market conditions are such that interest rates on long-term debt are very, very low, and that manifests itself today with the bid the county received on this on the highway facility bonds. What you see on the page right now is the winning bid from Baird, along with a whole host of syndicate partners, and the bid has a true interest rate of 1.606%. We were very pleased to see that. If you scroll down a little bit, Samantha, on the next page is the other bidders. They are from all over the country, which is an advantage that Eau Claire County has with the very strong rating, as we do attract attention from bidders all around the country. A lot of the bids were in that 1.6% range. We did have one that was a bit higher, and I think that's always a good practice that the county does of taking competitive bids on these issues to make sure we're having these underwriters compete to get the best interest rate results for the county. Samantha, if you could go to the next page, please. This next page was a page we had in the pre-sale report that I discussed with you about a month ago. In the middle of the page, when we did the pre-sale report, we tend to be conservative for planning purposes on the interest rate. We had estimated a rate of a little bit over 2%, the true interest rate. With the winning bid today, we're just at that 1.61%. And how that changes the annual payments for the county is in the pre-sale report, the total P&I, the column on the far right of this page, was estimated at $1,505,000 a year. With the winning bid today and the interest rates at the 1.6% level, the annual payments will be $1,145,000 approximately a year for 20 years. The rates are very low, as we discussed, but we do have in the issue the ability of the county to refinance the issue should lower rates be available, and that starts in 2029 and beyond. So we'll have the opportunity should lower interest rate conditions be available, or if the county would choose to apply cash to pay the debt issue faster, that option will be there for the county starting in 2029. From there, thank you, Samantha. I wanted to spend a second on the CIP financing for this year. Again, capital projects that were in your 2021 budget. This year's issue size is $7.4 million. And we did get 3 bids Baird was also the winning bidder on this issue with an interest rate of 0.90%, so just below 1% for a 10-year note issue. If you go to the next page, we have two other bidders, just over 1%. So the bidding was very tight on this issue. And Samantha, if you can go to the last page. Thank you again. On this, we had a similar page again with estimated interest rates in the pre-sale report of about 1.4%. With the sale today, it's 0.9%. And it translates to about $15,000 a year less in total principal and interest cost to the county board. What would be needed later on your agenda tonight is approval of the bond resolution prepared by Quarles and Brady and the note resolution prepared by your bond counsel, Quarles and Brady. But if it's okay with the chairman, if there's any questions or anything that the finance committee would like to add, I'll stop at this point and take those questions. We would certainly recommend approval of both of the sales to Baird, who was the winning bidder on both.
Thank you. Chairperson Pagonis.
I have a question for Sean. Do we need a 3/4 vote on this?
That was my question to you, Supervisor Pagonis.
Yes. You do not need a 3/4 vote for this approval. We did need it a month ago at the approval of the initial resolutions. Today's votes are a majority vote.
Simple majority.
Thank you.
Simple majority. Yes, sir.
I have nothing more.
Sorry. Any member of the Budget and Finance Committee? I hear none.
Chair Schmeier, we already voted on this before this meeting, and it was a unanimous vote on both of them.
Okay, I thought that Sean was asking if there were any last minute questions. I assume there aren't, so we'll proceed. Thank you very much, Sean.
Thank you.
Next item on our agenda is the EDSJI survey update by the task force members. I think we have Eric Killen, Luke Feedy, and Supervisor Schneider here tonight. Who wishes to go first here?
I believe Catherine Schaff was going to introduce me, but I can also introduce myself.
It's as you wish.
Go ahead, Supervisor Schneider.
Okay. It's my pleasure to introduce this crew, task force. Over the last few months, I've had the privilege of co-chairing the EDISJ task force, whose efforts are part of our county's commitment. You folks have passed resolutions about racism is a public health concern, and it's in our goals and all. So what I did was represent you at this task force, and we grappled with what do we mean by equity, diversity, and inclusion, and how do we translate resolutions and task force recommendations into actions as we deal with each other and as we deal with our publics. It was a great learning experience for me to work with employees from Human Resources, Human Services, Highway Information Systems, Sheriff's Office, and Veterans Service, and hear their passion for a work environment that supports equity, diversity, and inclusion. We conducted a survey. We brainstormed actions that the county could take as it moves forward. We eagerly await the hiring of the city county EDI SJ leader. What we did was we took the ball and ran forward 10 yards with it. Are we over the goal line? No, but we're moving forward. Eric Killen, the Director of Veteran Services, and Luke Feedy from Human Services will brief you on the survey, and then we'd all be glad to answer questions. Take it away, Eric.
Thanks, Kathy. Next slide. So this slide just kind of gives you an overview. You can see that there was a diversity and inclusion committee formed before this task force. The task force was formed in the beginning of 2020, and you can see the task force membership listed there. And then our goal as a group, Kathy kind of talked about, and we're going to focus in the next few slides on specifically what we did with the survey and the data that we received with the survey. So next slide, please. So understanding ourselves is the first step. And although when you think about it, there's all kinds of points that we have and that we live with each day. Your date of birth, your gender, your ethnicity, religious background, education, preferences, dislikes, opinions. Gathering this data is important because it gives us the starting point and a better understanding of our employees in Eau Claire County. So that's why we wanted to start with a survey to really refine and dig down to the lowest level. Who are we in Eau Claire County? So kind of the intent and objectives of the survey, there was a couple of them. The first one was obviously to understand and explore employee opinions and attitudes. But more than that, we wanted to create a baseline measurement and use this benchmark, these benchmark measurements of various behaviors, other aspects of Eau Claire County when we provide any education, provide any new processes, try to improve the organization. And then we wanted to use that data to drive any development and organizational change if we felt any was warranted. The survey was written by the task force. You can see it was 42 questions long. We utilized a 5-point Likert scale, strongly disagree to strongly agree. It was very important that we maintained anonymity with all of the respondents. This was so we could remain objective and so that the respondents would feel safe in answering the survey. We had a very good overall response rate. 68% of all county employees responded to the survey. And then the last thing I will talk about on this slide is why is the data? Surveys are important. It's an important tool and it's a powerful tool when we apply it correctly. It's a great place to start the conversation about who we are and what do we want to keep our finger on in the organization. And it also allows us to ask the right questions when we're talking with our employees. And it'll also help the leadership and managers focus on the right conversations and the right questions. So that's why it's important. Next slide. So this is the actual demographic piece of the survey. Cover quickly. I'll pull out some of the highlights. Actually, I'm going to go over this in case there's anybody that's listening that can't see the slide. Start with the ethnicity. You can see we had 1% Black African American. We had 0.5% American Indian, 3.5% Asian, 1.5% Hispanic, 92% white, not a surprise, and then 1.8% of Eau Claire County employees were none of the above. 5.2% of our employees are military veterans. In the gender column, we had 62% female, 36% male, 0.25% non-binary, and 0.5% transgender. And we had 5.7% of our employees with a disability. And then the final area in the demographic data is sexual orientation. We had 4.8% asexual, 0.25% bisexual, 1.3% gay or lesbian, 90% bisexual, 0.25% pansexual, 0.25% queer, and 3% none of the above. So that covers a quick overview of the data and the demographics. So I'm going to turn it over to Luke, who's going to talk about the actual survey findings. So Luke?
Thank you, Eric. So as Eric mentioned, I'm going to go through some of our survey findings and then talk a little bit about what the next steps are as we continue to move forward. I'm going to go read through some of these and just give you a snapshot of what we were able to garner by completing this survey. So we measured different domains, and one was how included, valued, and respected do our employees feel. And individuals perceive that they are included in their departments. 77% identified that they are comfortable voicing a contrary opinion to their supervisor. 77% feel that their direct supervisor values their opinion, and 76% feel that they are encouraged to innovate new ways of getting tasks completed more effectively. 72% of respondents feel that employees organization-wide treat each other with respect. So an overwhelming majority of employees indicating that they feel like they're respected and valued in their roles here at Eau Claire County. We measured a common purpose. How connected do people feel to a common purpose here in their work? 82% agree overall that they understand how their individual contribution and their department's mission goals of the county. So an overwhelming majority of people identifying that they understand how their work contributes to the goals of the county. We wanted to measure access to opportunity as well. 75% overall agreed that their direct supervisor supports them in their career development. Also, 75% indicated their job performance evaluation accurately reflected their work performance. And that's important. We want to make sure that when we're evaluating our employees, that we're doing so in a meaningful manner so that they have opportunities to grow as they continue in their career development. Work-life balance was an important piece that we measured as well. 79% of individuals agreed with the question, Eau Claire County enables me to balance my work and personal life. And I think it's important to note that this survey went out during a time when things were somewhat difficult, throughout COVID-19 and some of the pressures that we felt both through work and at home. And so I think this number is really significant, that 79% of individuals feel like they have an appropriate work-life balance. Next slide, please. So as we continue to look at our findings, we wanted to measure ethical and professional behavior. How ethical do our employees feel like managers in the organization are? 85% of individuals perceive that their direct supervisor demonstrates ethical behavior. And 76% of all respondents are confident in their coworkers' ability to perform their job duties. Now, 85% is an overwhelming majority. There's also 15% there that feel like there would be a question of ethics with supervisors. So I think it's important to note as well. Understanding diversity and equity, we wanted to ensure that when people are answering these questions, they have a grasp on what does it mean? What are these concepts and how are they applicable to the workplace? So 75% of individuals indicated that they know their role in promoting equity in the workplace. 72% of respondents agree that they are comfortable talking about equity, diversity, inclusion, and social justice with their coworkers. And 73% indicated that they benefit from working with a diverse workforce. So again, overwhelming majorities indicating that they're comfortable with diversity and equity. And at the same time, when we look at the statistics, we have a very diverse group. So 92% a white employee. I think it's always important to think about all aspects of the survey as we move through. Discrimination complaint and accommodations. This one was striking. 43% of individuals indicated that they do not understand how to file a discrimination complaint, and 40% do not know how to request a workplace accommodation. So that's almost half of our employees that don't know how to file a complaint or how to go through the process of doing so, and don't know how to request an accommodation. And based on our statistics, some of those employees could potentially be eligible for accommodations based on a physical or mental health disability. We wanted to measure time and resource. What do people think, or what do our employees think about the time and the resources that they have available to them? 77% of respondents indicated that a lack of time of resources is their greatest barrier to performing their work. So again, that time piece and resources, people are at capacity. 77% is a strong number. And last but not least on this page, trust. We wanted to measure the level of trust. How much do our employees trust the organization? All aspects of it. So individuals indicated a high level of trust in their peers within their departments, 81%. And it makes sense because people are very connected most of the time to the peers in their department, even throughout this period of time. And for their direct supervisors, 79%. The interesting piece on the coattails of this is that only a minority indicated trust in the county administration, so 32%, and 21% indicated trust in the county board. And again, we don't know what, correlation is not causation, but certainly when they have connections and relationships with individuals, there seems to be a higher level of trust. So next slide, please. So what do we do with this? How do we make the most out of this survey? Like Kathy said, we're on the 10-yard line. I would almost argue that it's the 5-yard line. This is going to require ongoing work. Translating the results of this survey into action should take as much as administering the survey itself. This is, again, a snapshot of where we're at. Let's take what we know right now and continue to develop programming based around what our identified needs are. And again, you can't just do this one time. We can't say, okay, here's the panacea to creating our issues with equity and diversity. We did a survey. We need to have strong linear data as time goes on to see if what we're doing programmatically is having an impact on how employees perceive all these different domains. So we need to continue to collect data and keep surveying teams, and we can break it down then in the future too, and see specifically where are the areas that we really want to focus. Again, facts without a plan are just facts, and we can't just have facts. We want to put some of these things into action. So making a plan to move forward with the results, developing recommendations to address problems raised by the survey. And some of these don't have to be earth-shattering things. I think there's a number of things that we could implement in the very near future, low-hanging fruit, if you will, to help people move in the right direction and help our organization move in the right direction. So that brings us to the end of this presentation. Thank you for allowing us to share these results with you. We appreciate your commitment to this and your willingness to allow us to share the hard work that was done. And again, this is the just the beginning.
Thank you. Supervisor McKinney. You're muted.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions on the slide about survey participants. And I first want to compliment the team and thank you for doing this work. I think it's really important. I have some curiosity about, we did not show ages of people responding, and was there a reason for that? And about the 32% who did not respond, do we know a race breakdown of that 32%?
Schneider, I'll answer. Unless you want to take it, Eric.
Go ahead, Kathy, and I can add on anything if I need.
We know nothing about the 32% that didn't take it, and we didn't ask about age. That would be another interesting thing to ask about.
Yeah, I would think so. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Neiman.
Thank you. And thanks to the group for doing this work. I'm really glad that steps are being taken to move forward on this important issue. I have a number of questions. I'm wondering what the response will be to the result that there's decreased trust in the county administration and the county board. It's really nice that we've had a majority of people that describe trust and comfort, but I'm wondering what percent of people of color in the impacted groups would describe that. It's probably not a surprise if we have a majority of white people responding to the survey that they're going to be maybe feeling more comfortable and trustworthy than people of color might. I'm also wondering if there's a plan for the county board to have access to the training that you'll be providing for the employees. And then finally, I'm wondering how the occurrence of discrimination experienced by people of color and impacted groups will be assessed. And to echo Susan Wolfgram's concern, how will these groups be included in the steps going forward? That's a lot, I know, but I wanted to raise them.
I want to answer at the 30,000 foot level. Did you want to answer higher than that, Catherine Schaaf?
Excuse me.
No, sorry, Chair.
Administrator Schaaf, did you have some input at this point?
Well, yes, but I will allow Catherine Schneider, Supervisor Schneider, to reply first, but I think I have some of the answers to some of those questions. So Supervisor Schneider.
At the 30,000 foot level, when I'm looking down on this, we need a person to lead this, because I think we've identified at least two really good directions. Training is a good direction, and involving the community is another good direction. And these kinds of things can't be done effectively by a task force that has other day jobs. So I think we're kind of at a pause of, we got to have a point person that starts, and then maybe there'll be another task force or committees, or, you know, the work will go on. But I think right now the committee can't do a whole lot more. That's my view from 30,000 feet.
Thank you. Thank you. And there is another graphic that is included in your packet. Samantha, are you able at this time to share that packet? It is actually an overview and timeline that the Committee on Administration discussed, because the county acknowledges that there are going to be a lot of steps that we are going to be taking and a lot of things that we're going to be doing to move this dialogue forward. And so we're going to be doing that work on many fronts. And we know that it's not going to be one person. As Supervisor Schneider indicated, though, we really need that position so that we have someone who is working to organize and assess where we're at and keep this initiative going. And so as you can see from this chart, we identified some of the things that we know that we are going to need to move forward. And one piece of that will be, and I'm trying to, let me just see here, Committee on Administration. If you look in the spring of 2021, the Committee on Administration, they began their discussion of the committee development. And so, although you have that point person, we also need to involve many voices. And so what that grouping of individuals will look like and who that will be, we're hoping for a very diverse advisory group that can provide input and ideas for levels of engagement. I think that the key here is that our focus is on being inclusive, allowing for affected populations a place at the table to look at how we as an organization can effectively address this topic. So that's in a nutshell. There are some things in place and more plans and action items that need to be identified. So, and that'll be done with the group as well.
Back to you, Supervisor Schneider.
Back to me?
Well, to manage the flow here, I think that there
Okay.
was more than that one question. Am I correct? Who was it who asked the questions? Was that Supervisor Neiman?
Yes, it was.
Yeah, it was me.
And were your questions answered?
Yeah, and I realize it's a lot, but I guess my main point in speaking was to raise these points as being important for the group to be looking at going forward.
Okay, thank you. We may go on then.
Another point
Yep,
that
thank
I
you very
wanted
much.
to say for Supervisor Neiman, when you said, you know, what's the county board gonna do? I think that's a great question, and somebody will get back to you, because obviously if there's a disconnect on trust between the employees and the county board, that's something that we darn sure ought to look at.
Thank you. Supervisor Christopherson, followed by Supervisor Russell.
Thank you, Chair Snyder. There were a couple of statistics here that I found alarming, and one I just want to bring point is I hope the administration, and maybe you alluded to this with training, is that we look at making sure employees do know how to file discrimination complaints and how to request accommodations. I think that is a very large piece of making sure that we are reaching out to employees. And then I just have a second comment. I might be digging into the details a little too far, but I noticed in one of the slides it said that in the government building that there's a gender inclusive restroom. And the
Excuse me,
way
we're
that was
getting,
phrased made it sound like, oh,
there's some kind of interruption there.
are you able to?
We can hear you, but there's a thumping sound in the background. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you. The way it was phrased, it made it sound like there was just one gender inclusive restroom. I'm wondering if that is the case. If it is the case, I think that we need to look at that. If we really are offering inclusiveness in our community buildings, we should be looking at multiple and not just a singular. That's all.
Thank you. Supervisor Russell, followed by Supervisor Cronk.
I was just wondering if there's any way, do you know if you got participants in the survey from all departments? Were all departments represented in some way in survey responses?
I believe we didn't ask because we didn't want anybody to be able to play let's identify the Native American person in the highway department kind of thing.
Yeah. Okay, so it is possible that maybe there's underrepresentation in the survey by a department?
You bet. Or by an ethnic group or a disability group or any other subgroup.
Okay, thank you.
Supervisor Cronk. Sorry. Was there someone else speaking?
I'm sorry, this was Luke. I just wanted to reiterate the survey was distributed to all departments within within Eau Claire County.
Thanks, Luke. Supervisor Cronk.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was kind of taking some notes as you were presenting, and I appreciate the group for this information. I wondered, you know, what would the demographics look like of people who participate or are the recipients of all of the services of Eau Claire County, and what would that look like? I also wonder, you know, I took to heart the public comment from Dr. Wolfgram. And when we look at the timeline, in my mind, some of the perhaps lack of trust of administration or of the county board is possibly or could be because of the lack of community centering, as was alluded in the public comment, that task force are formed, perhaps committees are formed before we've really outreached to our diverse community to see what is that input, rather than having that much later in the timeline. I think that's critical. And I did note in her public comment that, people with lived experience are experts. And I think many times there is a lack of trust of people who are, quote unquote professionals, or, county board supervisors or administration, or sort of the upper top down sort of decision making that can occur. I think that I'll use this as an example of that type of collaboration that happened recently in the county, and I'll be quick. But there was only really one county, according to an ACLU report, that had really a formalized policy of voter registration, or a voting policy within the jails throughout Wisconsin. And through the collaboration of community members, the willingness of our jail captain, and a very strong ACLU regional organizer who has been system impacted himself, came together to collaborate and say, what can we do? So now Eau Claire County is formalizing that policy, and that would not have happened or would not have come together really as it had, by allowing people who are most impacted, and many times who are systems impacted, to be able to understand and maneuver through and see how to better things. And so I really want to make the strong comment that I'm in full support of having some type of a public forum on racial equity, anti-oppression, justice, and human rights within our community. Because I think many times people who are maneuvering through these services, sometimes voluntary and sometimes very involuntary, have an amazing amount of expertise that we need to center before decisions are made and before committees are formed and task force are created. And that is not to negate any of the work or anybody who is on this particular task force. It's just saying, as we move forward, one of the intentions of the Racism as a Public Health Crisis Declaration or resolution was that we do center people who are most impacted and most underrepresented. So I'm hopeful that at some point sooner, very much sooner rather than later, we as a county board, not sure the rules on that, but can have a public forum before we start sort of creating that same, some of those same policies or systems that we've perpetuated for a long time. So thank you.
Thank you.
Another place we could get some of that input is on our county surveys that we do. I don't think there's a EDI kind of a question on that, but there sure could be.
Administrator Shaw, you have a comment?
No, sir.
Oh, I thought you were waving at me. Sorry.
I'm sorry, no.
Or is that your cat you're waving at? Yes, okay. Sorry. Supervisor Cronk, your suggestion actually is in process. There already is the process afoot. So we can share that with you very soon in the future. Okay.
Mr. Chair.
Just
Thank you.
Chairman,
uh,
Chairman, Mrs. Christopherson would like to talk.
I'm sorry, I apologize because my list of participants shrunk by 2/3 and I'm scrolling up and down trying to catch people. So let's have Supervisor Christopherson first, followed by Supervisor Bates. Supervisor Christopherson. Sorry about that.
Thank you, Chair. I already spoke, and I believe I lowered my hand. So thank you for reaching out.
Oh, okay, sorry. Supervisor Bates.
Thank you. And the one thing that I think for all of us, perhaps not terribly surprising, but in some ways certainly a red flag, is the only 21% trust within the county board. It tells us that words spoken in regard to staff certainly can have an impact, and decisions made by the board have an impact, but it tells us also that we have work to do when it comes to recognizing and being positive about the work of the county employees and their status in our eyes. So I hope that we will continue to work as a board to create the kind of trust that makes for a whole lot of difference as far as our relationship with the employees is concerned. Thank you.
Thank you. Next on our agenda is a report from our finance director on cash and 2020 fund balance. Norb, are you in line?
I am. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate the opportunity tonight to provide an update to the board on a couple of areas. As mentioned, one is cash and one is the general fund balance and some of the other fund balance projections for 2020. The first thing we'll talk about is cash. So the first graph that you have before you is a graph that we have discussed before. It's a trending of cash at the end of the quarter. It's a trending of the total cash balance for the county. So it does include even cash on hand that would be being paid out, if you will, settlements with municipalities, et cetera. So it's a snapshot in time. It's relative to see some of the fluctuations that we have seen in cash. If you recall, the lowest value on this chart was in September of 2019, and that was about the time I came before the board with some concerns because we had been trending down. It's refreshing to come to the board at a different time now when we can see that actually we're potentially trending in the right direction. But again, this is a point in time at the end of the quarter in the total cash. If we could go to the next slide, please. The next slide is a little bit different perspective on cash. It's only year end, but it takes into account that we have cash on hand that we again have to pay out. Usually these are settlements to the municipalities. So the top line, the blue line, is the total cash value on hand. The yellow or gold line, depending on how it looks on your screen, or the bottom line is the cash that would be needed to be paid out from that balance shortly after. So again, these are snapshots in time. And then the line in the center is really kind of effectively the county cash on hand. And so if you just look at that line, particularly if you look from 2019 to 2020, you see we're going from a little over 20 million to a little over 30 million, so effectively $10 million. Certainly some of the cash balance that we see also is related to just pure timing. So for example, we were more aggressive at borrowing in 2020. And again, we talked about that a little bit in terms of as we were going to be talking about the resolution for borrowing for 2021. But when it came to actual capital expenditures, we have a relatively large amount of capital expenditures that we have not yet spent at the end of 2020. So that difference of 10 million, I would attribute about half of that just to capital timing. And then I'd say the other half is, relatively speaking, related to kind of the operational activity that's gone on for the county in 2020. So that, I think, is a testament to a lot of things that have gone on through the county in 2020. I think departments have been diligent in monitoring expenditures. We had the bridge plan, we had the furloughs, we had a number of things that we did that we implemented to mitigate the potential downside that we thought we'd see with COVID-19. And then as we'll see when we talk about the general fund balance, didn't necessarily materialize quite the way we thought. So again, I just wanted to update the board and provide this perspective. that as it relates to cash, I think it's a good story for where we ended 2020.
Thank you. Questions or comments? Again, I'm monitoring a very small box of participants. I see no hands raised. Is there anyone?
Okay.
Oh, Chair Smyer, Martha Neiman, I have a question.
Thank you, Martha. Go ahead.
How much of this very nice picture has to do with the amount of money that the counties received from CARES for COVID?
I would say probably not much really, because most of the CARES funding was actually spent. So from a cash perspective, it was probably received and spent. And in some cases, we had to spend the money prior to getting the funding. So from a cash flow perspective, I'd say probably very little in terms of what was relative at the end of the year.
Oh, good. Thank you.
Okay. I see no other hands raised. Thank you very much, Norb, for your report.
Okay, well, we'll now move on to the next report, if I could.
Yes, please.
Okay, so the next report is fund balance analysis. This is an update from a report that I have shown the board previously and that we've done in the past in terms of year end. There are two columns in the report. The first column represents on January 13th a projection done by departments for where they thought they would end 2020. The second column, dated 3/4, is an update based on what we've seen in our financial system for all transactions recorded through the end of February. The reason for the 3/4 date was I wanted the most recent projection or most recent estimation of where we would land with the general fund balance prior to meeting with Moody's. We had that discussion earlier tonight that Mr. Lentz talked about. So certainly one of the criteria, and he mentioned it, was that unassigned general fund balance is an indicator that Moody's does pay close attention to. And so that column represents what we talked about with Moody's in our call with them. So that you'll see in that column, the net activity from departments is a $2.7 million roughly surplus that we're projecting. So 2.662 million. Which would get us to an ending fund balance of $12.8 million. Again, this is the unassigned general fund only. And that would represent 34.8% of our general fund expenditures for 2021. That's the ratio that we had been talking about previously. And that's about a 24% increase that we would be expecting to see in our general fund balance. So excellent in terms of that we're heading in the right direction. Good that we're seeing a positive increase in the general fund balance. I would put a little caveat to it that one of the things that Moody's does is they also look at how are we in comparison to other AA1 rated municipalities or rated bondholders. And in that perspective, we're actually in the lower end of the general fund in terms of the reserve amount. So still heading in the right direction and good positive movement, but something we again have to continue to monitor. So as you look down through the adjustments on the departments, again, the one column was a projection. The second column in 3/4 was based on what we've recorded in our financial system. For the most part, there won't be a lot of movement with these departments other than potentially the human services, just because their financials won't close out till the end of June. So their number that you see there is $375,000. That's an estimate based on what they see now. So there's a lot of transactions yet to be recorded. For the majority of the other departments, I would not expect much movement between this number and probably the end and final number. And you can see there were certainly some swings of what occurred between the January 13th estimate and the 3/4 financial transactions recorded. So the human services number we talked about a little bit. Non-departmental swung about $180,000. That was really primarily sales tax. In the January 13th, we estimated sales tax would come in 100,000 less than budget. And 3/4, we now know that it came in about 130,000 better than budget. So that was the primary reason for that swing. The Parks and Forest saw an improvement, primarily increased timber sales from what they were projecting. And then we saw a fairly sizable increase in the surplus in the Sheriff's Department, primarily in the personnel related category. I would say that's overtime, overall personnel, as well as on the benefits and the health insurance, depending again on the choices that the Sheriff's Department employees. So when you look at that in total, those departments, and if they all rolled as we believe they will, it would be about a $2.7 million increase in the general fund. The second page, if you could just scroll down, Samantha, to the next page. The next page are the funds other than the general fund. And you'll see, especially if you look at the special revenue funds as an example, you know, there's some movement in there in terms of what happened in terms of the 2020 estimate between surplus and deficit. Some of those in the watershed and anti-drug and recycling, some of those were planned that there would be reduction activity in some of those fund balances. So that's not unusual. ADRC is at this point showing a slight surplus for the year. And then if you move down to the proprietary funds, the two enterprise or proprietary funds, airport and highway. Airport had a fairly sizable surplus. I would say this is one example, back to the earlier question about the impact of CARES funding. The airport did receive a fair amount of CARES funding, and they do have some left in their fund balance, primarily for capital improvements, and they will likely see some additional funds as part of the most recent stimulus plan as well. And then highway, you're seeing an increase of about 875,000, again, kind of primarily on lower expenditures. So anyway, that I just wanted to provide the board with an update. We'll continue to close the books, and we'll have another update probably in the May timeframe, where I can, at that point, we'll be pretty much closed with all departments other than human services at that point.
Thank you. Questions or comments?
Schneider with a question.
Supervisor Schneider.
You mentioned briefly that the airport would get some stimulus funding, I think. Other areas that you think will benefit from this most recent stimulus?
Well, yeah, I think we have the opportunity to see certainly our general allocation from the stimulus for the county is over $20 million. There's a lot to be, I guess, discovered in terms of exactly what we could spend that money on, but the initial indication is that our allocation would be over $20 million. We're waiting for the Department of Treasury to provide detail in terms of what those funds could be used for. I think the City County Health Department will also receive some amount of additional funding. I think ADRC has the opportunity to potentially see some additional funding as well. And Administrator Schaaf may have some other comments on that as well.
Administrator Schaaf?
Yes, I do. And actually, if I provide comment now, then that would be my only update, and we can simply finalize here with reports.
Okay.
The 2021 American Rescue Plan is being monitored by the Wisconsin Counties Association and the National Association of Counties. Right now, the National Association of Counties is providing input to Treasury on some of the things that they would like to see as part of the implementation guidelines, so that the implementation guidelines can actually be utilized by county governments to build community. And I think that when you look at it from the perspective of build community, there will be a lot of opportunity here. as Director Kirk indicated, there are a number of specified dollars going to specific program areas. And those include monies that will be going to deal with housing issues, continued response, and then there's some discretion that counties will have. So I think one of the things that we will be doing from a county perspective is looking at having, once the criteria come in, a public process that we can go through for identifying how to best administer these funds to implement in our community. I think every community's implementation will be slightly different, and we'll want our investment to reflect the community need at this time.
Thank you. Any other questions or discussion on this matter? Thank you for your report. Supervisors, you have in your packet or linked the written reports regarding department annual reports, community agency reports, and then we have listed reports from the finance department, the contingency fund, and the February vouchers over $10,000.
Mr. Chairman?
Supervisor Wilkie.
Yes, I wanted to draw board members' attention to the report that they received this February in their packet. Budget and Finance had been requesting that we make an effort at being more transparent in that report. One, for the public, and two, for us as supervisors. Our responsibility is to review payments of over $10,000. It would be helpful to know a little bit more what the service is, what the taxpayers' dollars are going for. I want to compliment our finance department, and in particular our human services department, for the change in format. Now, it won't answer all your questions, but you'll note that you're not any longer just seeing a big bulk of dollars for contracted services. And by no means do you have a clue what that may or may not be. You'll notice that they've expanded it to try to give you a brief synopsis of what the taxpayers' dollars are going for. So my compliments to both of those departments for a small step, but a step forward in terms of transparency for us as supervisors and the general public.
Thank you. Are there any other comments or questions regarding the written reports? I see no hands raised. Supervisor Neiman, would you lower your hand, please? Thank you. Okay. Next on our agenda, presentation of petitions, claims, and communications. Proclamation proclaiming Severe Weather Awareness Week, April 12th to the 16th. I'm asking the county clerk to read the proclamation.
All right. Whereas tornado emergencies are of great concern to Eau Claire County, presenting imminent threat to life and property and significant impact upon those who are affected, and whereas severe thunderstorm phenomena such as powerful wind gusts, large hail, flood-producing heavy rains, and lightning pose a threat to the lives, safety, and property of the citizens of Eau Claire County. And whereas the state of Wisconsin had 20 confirmed tornadoes throughout 8 days in 2020, there were 4 confirmed tornadoes between Dunn, Chippewa, Clark, Trempealeau, and Jackson counties in 2020. And whereas tornadoes, severe storms, flooding, and strong winds have caused hundreds of thousands of dollars in damage to homes, businesses in Eau Claire County. And whereas the citizens of Eau Claire County are participating in 2 tornado drills at 1:45 p.m. and 6:45 p.m. on Thursday, April 15th, 2021, in order to educate all the Eau Claire County residents on the importance of emergency preparedness. And whereas the Eau Claire County Emergency Management Team urges all citizens to prepare for severe weather by educating themselves on severe weather preparedness and safety strategies, including utilizing the county's emergency notification system, RAVE. And whereas the citizens of Eau Claire County can be seriously affected by tornadoes and severe weather, And it is essential that we increase awareness of the dangers of severe weather hazards and the protective measures that can be taken to proactively ensure safety during dangerous weather situations. And now therefore, I, Nick Smeyer, Chair of the Eau Claire County Board of Supervisors, do hereby proclaim April 12th through the 16th, 2021 as Severe Weather Awareness Week, and I call this observance to the attention to all citizens of Eau Claire County.
Thank you. Motion?
DeLuca moves.
Moved by DeLuca.
Schaffnagel.
Second by Supervisor Schaffnagel. Any questions or discussion regarding this proclamation? See no hands raised. I hear no voices. Supervisors, you are prepared to vote now on file 75. Please unmute. All those in favor of file number 75, please indicate by saying aye.
Ashmeyer,
Oh, sorry.
Aye.
that's incorrect. File 75 is the ordinance creating child support agency fees.
Sorry. Cross-eyed.
Voting on is the proclamation.
Cross-eyed again. Thank you. My screen keeps jumping around. I apologize. Okay. Let's do this again. All supervisors in favor of the proclamation as read, please indicate by saying aye.
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 As opposed by nay. Thank you. It is passed. Next are the first reading of ordinances by committees from the Committee on Administration, file 75.
An ordinance creating section 4.30.140 of the Eau Claire County Code, Child Support Agency Fees.
This is an ordinance. This is first reading. I believe this goes on now to second reading at the next meeting of the county board. Is that correct, Court Counsel?
That is correct.
Thank you. We'll proceed. Section number 10 of our agenda from the Committee on Administration, file 123.
A resolution authorizing the purchase of approximately 6.87 acres of land located in the town of Washington along US Highway 53 and Otter Creek Road from Marlis Sterry and Christopher Horlicker for the sum of $220,000, authorizing the county administrator to execute all necessary documents on behalf of Eau Claire County.
Motion?
Motion by Leary.
Approval.
Supervisor Leary, second by
Jennings
Supervisor.
seconds.
I believe I heard Supervisor Henning second.
Chair Schreier,
Yes, sir.
and this is Corporation Counsel Tim Sullivan. And I should have caught this before, and I apologize for not catching it before. I would suggest that somebody makes a friendly amendment to this. In the be it further resolved, it indicates that the county administrator is authorized to execute all necessary documents. In fact, it would be the county clerk who would execute the sales documents.
Without objection, we will make that correction and proceed. Is there any objection to accepting that? Okay, without objection, we'll go forward then. Explanation, Supervisor Bates, I believe. Supervisor Bates.
Thank you, Chair Smeyer. This resolution authorizes the purchase of a sliver of land, about 6.87 acres, that's just adjacent to where the proposed highway building is going to be constructed along Highway 53. The reason for purchase really has to do with access, easier access in and out of the property that the county is developing. And this has already gone through some committees and has been approved. And so I think it's logical to have it so that we can make better use of traffic coming in and out of that property. The purchase price is $220,000.
Thank you. Supervisor Henning, would you please mute?
Sure.
Thank you. Okay. Questions or comment? Questions or comment? It's fairly straightforward. I see no hands raised. I hear no voices. I see no one waving at me. Therefore, supervisors, we will proceed to vote on file 123. All those in favor of approving file 123, please indicate by saying aye.
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 By nay.
Aye.
Was that one nay?
One nay.
Okay, one nay. Thank you. That will be recorded. The majority has voted yes. This item is passed. Thank you. Next item is from the Committee on Finance and Budget, file number 121.
A resolution awarding the sale of $24,350,000 general obligation highway facility bonds, Series 2021B.
Thank you. Motion.
Henning will move.
Moved by Supervisor Henning, second.
Second by Bates.
Second by Supervisor Bates. Thank you. Supervisor Pagonis with explanation.
Thank you. This will be maybe the third or fourth time that the board has heard about this. This is this would be a 20-year bonding for funds for the highway building. The vote that we just took on the parcel of property is the one that's adjacent to where this building would be built. So we have very, very favorable rates, and I encourage this. I would like a roll call vote or an equivalent of a roll call vote, please. And I hope everyone votes in favor of it. It passed Finance Committee 5-0, so we're very supportive. It's a very low interest rate, and we're very grateful.
And I believe Supervisor Pagonis that this passes by simple majority, correct?
Yes, I think it was the vote that we took to go out and get bids needed a 3/4 vote. This just needs a simple majority.
Thank you. Questions or comment? I see no hands raised. I hear no voices, and no one is waving at me. So supervisors will proceed to vote on file number 121. All those in favor of approving file.
I'd like a roll call, please.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. Feel free to remind me. I expect Supervisor Pagonis would leap on that. Thank you very much. Clerk McDonald.
All right. Supervisor Gibson,
Yes.
McKinney. Okay. Knight.
Yes.
Is that a yes? I'm sorry, didn't hear that clearly.
That was a yes.
Okay. Pagonis.
Yes.
Anton, not here. Zook.
Yes.
Chilson.
Yes.
Stelgis.
Yes.
Maury.
Yes.
Coffee.
Yes.
Henning.
Yes.
Bates.
Yes.
Russell.
Yes.
Gatlin.
Yes.
Smyer.
Yes.
Hambuck Boyle.
Yes.
Neiman.
Yes.
Dunning.
Yes.
Wilkie.
Yes.
Anderson.
Yes.
Beckfield, I believe, was absent. Schneider.
Yes.
Leary.
Yes.
DeLuca.
Yes.
Jansen.
Yes.
Schroffnagel.
Yes.
Roberts.
Yes.
Kronk.
Yes.
Christofferson.
Yes.
26 yeses, no, 3 absent.
Thank you. The motion passes. Next is the companion, file 122.
A resolution awarding the sale of $7,405,000 general obligation promissory notes, Series 2021C.
Thank you. Motion. Motion.
Hi, Larry.
Pagonis moves.
Supervisor Leary moves. Who was the second?
Wilkie
Pagonis will
seconds.
second.
I'm sorry, there were 3 voices there. I'll take
Go ahead,
Supervisor Wilkie as second. Explanation, Supervisor Pagonis.
Thank you. I just want to backtrack just real quickly. We just voted on 2021B. We're now taking under consideration 2021C, as in
Right.
Charles. 2021A goes back to a refunding we did a few months ago that will actually occur in June.
Right.
So if you're feeling like it's just out of place or you're not tracking, that's the reason. This particular borrow, it's 7.4 million. It's less than we typically have for our annual capital improvement amounts. And the rate for this is very favorable. It's 0.9%. It's also bared. And so this is to get through what our annual capital expenditures typically include. So a whole variety of things. And if anyone needs the list, I can point it out to them in their budget book. So I encourage your approval. And again, Chair Smyer, I was hoping we would have one of those types of votes where we can just, be able to say yes or no, but I would still like a roll call vote on this since it's a borrow.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chair Pagonis. Okay, questions or discussion? I see no hands raised. I hear no voices, and I see no hands waving at me. Supervisors, we are now voting on file 122 by roll call vote, and it is simple majority that will pass. Clerk McDonald.
Supervisor Gibson,
Yes.
McKinney,
Yes.
Knight,
Yes.
Pagonis,
Yes.
Zook,
Yes.
Chilson,
Yes.
Felges,
Yes.
Maury,
Yes.
Coffee,
Yes.
Henning,
Yes.
Bates,
Yes.
Russell,
Yes.
Gatlin,
Yes.
Smyer,
Yes.
Hambuck Boyle,
Yes.
Neiman,
Yes.
Dunning,
Yes.
Wilkie,
Yes.
Anderson,
Yes.
Schneider,
Yes.
Leary,
Yes.
DeLuca,
Yes.
Jansen,
Yes.
Schroffnagel,
Yes.
Roberts,
Yes.
Kronk,
Yes.
Christofferson.
Yes.
That's 27 yeses, 2 absent. That's the same for the last one also. I miscounted last time. It was also 27 present and 2 absent.
Well, it was majority, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah, either way.
So,
Yeah.
the resolution passes. Thank you. The next item is file 118.
Resolution disallowing the claim of A+ Storage Solutions filed on February 8th, 2021 by owner Marcia Bowman against Eau Claire County, directing the county clerk to notify the claimant of said disallowance.
Motion.
Pagonis moves.
I'll take Schroffnagel moves and Pagonis seconds. Thank you. Sorry for the confusion of voices there. Explanation, Supervisor Pagonis.
Thank you. This would have been helpful if there had been one more paragraph in the fact sheet. So Miss Bowman has a parcel of property off Highway 12, and she wanted to do an expansion, and there were issues with some drainage, and planning and development told her she had to control the drainage issue. And there were neighbors, you know, other people across the way who were complaining. There were lodging complaints. So planning development delayed in issuing a permit for her to expand, and Ms. Bowman is blaming the county for her loss of profits. And the WMIC, our insurance carrier, says we are not liable for that because we were asking for a legitimate correction. So we are not liable for this, and even if I guess if we hadn't, we would still be not liable for it. But because of her lack of action, things were delayed, and so we just wish to disallow this.
Questions or discussion? I see no hands raised. There are no voices. I see no hands being waved at me. Supervisors, we will now vote on file 118. We'll use a voice vote. Please unmute for the vote. Now wait a minute while you unmute. All those in favor of file 118, please indicate by saying aye.
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 All those opposed by nay. It is unanimous. Thank you. Next is file 124.
A resolution, financial policy procurement card.
Motion.
Moved by Supervisor
Motion.
Wilkie.
Supervisor Wilkie moves. Who was the second? I'm sorry, who was the second?
Gatlin second.
Thank you. Supervisor Gatlin seconds. Thank you. Explanation. Supervisor Pagonis.
Thank you, Chair Smyer. So the finance department has been working very hard to put together financial policies. We've gone for a long time without having very many. We have maybe about 3 or 4 that I could think of. And so we're moving forward in with a list of policies, and Norberg has done all of the heavy lifting in terms of the development of the policy, and has been very kind at my nitpicking. So this is a policy on a purchasing card that staff have to, typically is to buy routine type things. There are some instances that it might be used for children's long-term care type equipment. But so before this development, we did not have a written policy. Accompanying this policy is a manual that gives more precise procedural instructions. And so, but the policy is basically what we would consider the gospel. So I'm sure you all read it in great depth, and I would seek your approval of this.
Thank you. Questions or discussion? Supervisor Christopherson.
Thank you, Chair Smyer. And thank you, the Finance Committee, for working on this. This is, I can see that there's a lot of work put into this, and it's very necessary, I feel. I would just like to offer one suggestion with the idea to be more inclusive to those that do not identify as his or her. Under E, the 4th line down states the finance director or his or her. I would suggest an edit to there.
Sure, I don't see where you're reading. Can you just tell me again where you're reading?
Yep, under E, let me get to it again.
E is in
Yep.
Esther. I was under B. Okay, I see
Yep.
it. So we will change it to there. We can make that editorial change after at any time. So sure, we can do that.
Okay,
we'll do
thank
that.
you.
Anything else?
I see no other hands raised. No one is waving at me. I hear no voices. Supervisors, We will now vote on file 124. Supervisor Pagonis, you're not requesting a roll call on this.
No.
I am not.
Okay. Thank you.
This could be a voice vote.
Okay, we will go with that. All those in favor of file 124, please indicate by saying aye.
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 All those opposed by nay. I hear no nays. It is unanimous. Thank you very much. Supervisors, we are now at the end of our agenda. We have accomplished our purposes. Thank you for your patience, your perseverance, and your time. We are now adjourned.
This program was brought to you by a cooperation between Newsworks and Eau Claire County.